Welcome to She's a Full-On Monet, a digital lifestyle magazine for women. Every week, our editor-in-chief, Kelly Castillo, along with Megan Block and special guests, participate in a deep dive discussion about recent articles and topics we have covered. We invite you to become part of our community where everyone's welcome.
Hello, everyone. This is episode 3 of She's a Full-On Monet. We are back to discuss some of our most recent articles with you today. This is Kelly, and I have with me Megan.
Hi, everybody. How is everybody? Hopefully good. It's been a whirlwind of a week for me again. I don't know about you. I literally just got back from hanging out outside of my kid's school with like a pig. Because
I was going to say, how did the pig wrangling go today?
I literally was there just to kind of, I think it's because of like, again, the pandemic and them having, the closeness and stuff. They just needed to make sure that the kids were distancing themselves. So I was just kind of there wrangling more kids than pig. But like they're reading Charlotte's Web in their class right now. So one of the students has a farm and had a pig, and so they were like, oh, let's bring the pig to school. So they brought the pig and they talked about the pig and the different parts of the pig, and all the kids got to like touch the pig. And
that is actually adorable.
It was really, I mean, I love Charlotte's Web. My daughter hasn't seen the movie yet. She's just reading the book first, which I think is good. It's better.
Yeah.
But both are just like, it's such a great story. And so to have like an actual pig come to your school is kind of a cool hookup, but it was just like, stay there.
That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it was more just, babysitting. But anyway, how was your morning?
My morning was not pig related, but also hectic. This week, you're right, has been, I feel like I have back-to-back appointments every single day this week and zero downtime.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going out of town Friday. So I'm trying to squeeze, 5 days of work into 4 days a week. So It's a little hectic. I still have 3 more appointments after this today. So yeah.
just your casual Wednesday.
Yeah. But I am excited to be back recording with you.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and I'm excited about our topics today too. So today we're going to try to cover 2 of our articles, and I think they kind of relate to each other a little bit. We are recording this in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, which is, I think, a great time to touch on these issues. And we're going to talk about resilience, and we're also going to talk about imposter syndrome. So I think those 2 topics kind of probably, appeal or touch on a lot of women's own thoughts and feelings. I know for me, definitely. So I think they're good topics for us to cover. And we probably both have quite a bit to say.
Oh, yeah. No, I know especially the resilience topic actually coincides really well with last week's topics with self-care and like how to build daily habits and stuff like that. I mean, they just kind of bleed into each other. So absolutely. May is the best month to be talking about both of these things. And I can relate and have my own opinions on both subjects. So
well, let's dive into the topic of resilience. So we wrote an article. Neither of us wrote the article. One of our writers, Tess, wrote it. I think she did a really good job. She wrote the article about how to kind of increase your own resilience and kind of give yourself a little bit of a thicker skin and have better coping mechanisms to deal with what happens in your life. And I think we all have, every single person's life is messy. I don't know anyone whose life is puppies and rainbows. So I think we can all, use some tips on resilience because, sometimes it seems like a tsunami, and that's the time when you really need to have as thick skin as possible.
Absolutely. Especially, I mean, if you didn't have resilience before the pandemic, I mean, resilience was now built upon us, especially anyone. I can relate to the people that had to all of a sudden be like a full-time, work from home employee, as well as a homeschool teacher, as well as like all these other things. And it's just like, even if just the resilience was just making it to the end of the day, my father personally lives alone, and his form of resilience was just, having to get through quarantine and
Yeah.
not be able to see the people that he loved and do the things that were routine for him that gave him not purpose, but gave the day a bit of a spice, right? So resilience comes in all forms, right? But we've all had a taste of it, I feel, in 2020. 2020
Exactly. I
was
was
like
just going to
the year
say
of
that
resilience.
because I feel like not only like as wives and moms, we've had to wear so many hats over the last, year and a half, and we've had to play roles that we didn't have to play before. I think it's been equally hard for people who live alone and people who are retired and are more isolated, because I know that the social support system that is so important for your mental health, it's so important for your brain as you age. Being social is one of the biggest factors in having less cognitive issues when you get older. So without that support system, so many people were really isolated. And if you had a lot of programs you were involved with, whether it was volunteer work or part-time work or anything that you were doing before the pandemic, you really lost kind of the sense of being relevant. I know that's been really hard for a lot of people. So yeah, it's been a tough, year going on 2 years now. And hopefully we're over it quickly, but I think we've all learned a lot about ourselves and learned a lot about resilience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as we touch back on Tess's article, the first part that she talks about is self-care. And I know we talked a lot about following those daily habits, making sure you're taking time for yourself to self-soothe or, whatever it is. It's so hard to find that time, especially during, the time that we were in with quarantine to set aside that time for yourself, but making sure that you do set aside that time, it makes you more whole, do it for the sake of being more whole and showing up better for everything else. But yeah, self-care is very important and something
it's very
that I
important, but it
learn.
for so many of us, it's the thing we put last on our to-do list for the day. And I know when my kids were at home and they were growing up, I've always had issues with high blood pressure, and I would go to the doctor and the doctor would say, well, tell me about your lifestyle. And I would tell him, I've got 4 kids at home and I'm juggling a lot. And he would say, oh, well, you need to reduce your stress level.
I know.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm aware of that. Like, are you offering to take one of the kids or all of them for the weekend? Is that what's happening now? Because it's easier said than done,
Totally.
And I think that that ties in, to that article that we did in episode 1, that you have to carve out, even if you're a schedule person, you have to put it in your schedule. And that can be whatever that means for you. But they say it a lot of different ways. Like people like to say, you have to put your oxygen mask on before you put on your child's or anyone else's. The airplane always tells you that. Or people will say, you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to kind of be able to fill up your own cup before you can give it out to other people. And I think that's so true. And we all hear it and we all understand the concept. But
we're like, oh,
actually,
I know, the eye rolls and everything.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're a busy mom and you haven't even had time to like take a shower, like it sounds very daunting to do self-care.
Or even if you were used to going, to an office and now you're working from home and now your whole entire lifestyle has changed. I mean, you don't even need to necessarily have kids to be too busy for self-care. You just have to make sure that whatever you're doing, whether you're now working a ton of extra time or, you don't have that separation anymore, that you're taking the time to make that separation from everything else and yourself. Because I mean, when I started doing that, I showed up to everything else so much better, and it was a simple thing like taking a walk outside in the sunshine. It wasn't, didn't have to be a full-blown candles lit bubble bath.
No, you just have to carve out short periods of time to kind of recharge your batteries. And I think you're right. If you don't have kids, it's still an issue because we have an article coming out about this soon too, about hustle culture. And this idea that we have to be on and working all the time, and every hobby you have now has to be a side gig, and you have to monetize it. And you have to, I mean, there's this hashtag girl boss, concept and culture where if you're only doing one job, then where's your side gig? Why aren't you hustling on the weekends? You could be, and sometimes we need to recognize our own limits, and what's best for us might not be that. It might be to have hobbies that you just do for pleasure. It might be to
Absolutely.
spend that time that you would be quote unquote hustling on self-care,
Mm-hmm.
and it'd be okay with that. And as a society, we need to normalize that, because that's
We need
okay.
to normalize having a creative outlet that you're not pressured to monetize yourself off of. It's like,
Yes.
oh, that's what are you doing? How much are you doing? No, I just do it for fun.
It's
And that's
okay to work,
okay.
a 9-to-5 job and clock out and come home and leave your work at your work, and not, and bosses need to normalize that too, because I feel like a lot of employees have a ton of pressure to work overtime, take work home with them, show that you're the most valuable employee by working the most hours. And it's not healthy for us. We need to chill out. We definitely
We
do.
really do. Self-care is more important than ever now, right?
Yeah. And how
Yeah.
can you be resilient? How can you react to things with an appropriate level of reaction when you're at a high intensity level all the time in every part of your day? I mean,
Yep.
it's just, yeah, that's number one, practice self-care for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think second one was reach out to loved ones, which is, again, back to this pandemic that we're in. We're just, I'm vaccinated now and my hubby's vaccinated, so is my son. So it makes us feel much more relieved to be able to get together with loved ones we haven't seen. I just saw my sister last weekend, and we're back to seeing my in-laws and having a much wider family circle. And that makes a huge difference, because for most people, your family and your loved ones are your support system. I know that's not true for everybody, unfortunately, but hopefully for the people who that isn't the case, they can find a family that they choose, right? A family of friends that is their support system. And I would still call those people your loved ones. They don't have to be related to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Some people were there like, oh, my whole entire family is terrible. I've created my own family. It's like, I feel so much better when I have just a silly FaceTime with my best friend, and it's just like, I
Yes.
feel like almost like I went to the gym, almost like I went to church. It's almost like I just feel better. I feel lighter, and so she's not necessarily related to me, but I have the best conversation with her because it's not, it's just more free. So whoever your loved ones are, whether it's your actual family, I haven't gotten together with as many people as I want to yet, but the fact that we're getting towards that, and it's like a possibility to like make plans now and travel and do stuff is like the most exciting thing, because you need as humans, we need connection. We need to connect with people, and we start to feel like just depleted and like a little grouchy all the time, and we can't really understand why. And I mean, yes, Zooms and FaceTime are all fine and good, but it's not the same as actual human interaction,
Yeah, and I'm a huge introvert. I mean, when I'm social, I really need time afterwards to decompress. If I'm at a big gathering of people, I really need quiet time after that. But at the same time, during the pandemic, I realized even though I'm an introvert, I really still need that outlet of having those social interactions. I'm not, I don't want to be alone all the time. It's a balance thing for me. Yeah. And I think when we say, reach out to loved ones, we also need to keep in mind that might require people to kind of weed through the people closest to them in their lives that maybe they were closest to them pre-pandemic, and pull out the ones that don't have a positive, that you don't have a positive interaction with. If you come away from an interaction with a family member or a friend and you're exhausted emotionally, and either it's all about them, or they are making comparisons all the time, or they're just not supportive of what you're going through. I mean, those are the ones you have to really take a hard look at, because
it's hard, because some of those people, it could be family, and some of those people, you could be that person that's like the light to their day, and it's more obligatory on your end, but you're doing it because they need it,
Yeah, and that's important too. But I think if we have even one or two people that we know, if something good happens to us, we can call that person, and we're going to get a huge cheerleader response. Or if something bad happens to us, we can call that person and they're going to be there. That's all you really need, is one or two solid people as a safety net to fall back on. And you can still keep relationships with the people that aren't that for you. Just, you need to understand what the relationship is, and not expect things of them that they can't provide for you, because it's just that's not the relationship.
Oh, yeah. That's true. No, I totally agree. And I have a mix of both, you know, and you
Yeah.
need to almost like, you need to have, after you have the one where it's, you know, it's more one-sided than the other, you need to go to that one that's more of like a lighter, more fun to kind of feel leveled out,
Yes.
because it can be heavy, you
Yeah.
know, having people rely on you. But man, during the pandemic, especially for people who, like we talked about, were alone, you know, and all they have is FaceTime or Zoom, it's like the highlight of their day. You know, you have to be there for those people sometimes when you might not necessarily want to, or you might not be getting the same amount of good energy from,
Yeah,
you
it might
know?
not be an equal exchange, but
Yeah,
you know, you get an emotional benefit too of knowing that you are there for someone when they need you. I mean, that to me,
absolutely.
acts of love is my, you know, acts of service is my love language. So I totally get that. There are people that I have, you know, close relationships with that I wouldn't necessarily lean on, but it gives me a lot of satisfaction to know that I can be that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
there's a benefit there too.
There is totally a benefit there. Creating a list of goals is that,
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's the next one.
Yeah, that's the next one.
I thrive on lists. I
I
love
know
lists.
that about you. You are a
Oh,
to-do list queen.
man, and you know what? There's like a basic list, and then there's a list you can do that just makes it really kind of, I find it therapeutic. I really do. I start my day, and the days that I don't do it, I don't feel as, not that I don't feel as accomplished. I just don't feel like as solid, you know,
Yeah.
like I know I got this done, you know, and I know that like my time management is much better when I have a list, because then I can see flat out right in front of me what needs to get done. I also am the type of person that will like write what we're having for dinner,
Yeah.
or, you know, three things that I need to remember, like drink water is always one of them, you know.
Well,
Or
I am very easily overwhelmed.
yes.
My to-do list, when I start writing it out, it starts to give me anxiety.
Mm.
So I am I'm one of those people who adds things to the to-do list just to cross them off, like things I've already
Me
done
too.
that morning, just to have a win. I
Oh
start my day with a
man,
win. You
crossing
know,
off is
got
like
out of
so
bed, check off
satisfying.
that.
Yep.
Fed the dog, check
Wake
off
up.
that. Like I'm like, I am going for this today. But seeing it, even when it overwhelms me, if I see it all
Yeah,
written out, it really
true.
helps me prioritize. And then I can say, okay, you know what? This is too much. I can delegate this to that person. I can push this off until tomorrow. These are the 5 things or the 3 things that are must do's today. And then as long as I get those done, I give myself permission to count that as a full win. And I, you know, I let myself kind of take care of myself in that way by not trying to complete the whole list.
Man, I
If
feel you
it's
on that. As I'm
overwhelming.
writing it out, I feel my heart start to beat really fast. And I'm like, I almost want to do things as I'm writing them. I'm like, oh, after I forgot, I have to get that done. And it overwhelms. But at
Yeah.
the same time, I also find such satisfaction in crossing
Mm-hmm.
that off and
It
knowing
is.
that I did get it done. Because if I try and make a mental list, then that anxiety of like, shoot, did I do that? Like things fall through the cracks, you know, deadlines fall through the cracks. You know, I'm trying to balance my schedule and my kids' schedule,
Yeah.
you know, and it's almost like, you know, and then I get this overwhelming feeling of, do I need to make a personal to-do list and then a work to-do list separately? Because if they bleed into each other, it's like, you know,
Yeah.
overwhelmingly
It
long.
goes on for pages and you're like,
Yeah,
this isn't possible.
it's
And
impossible.
yeah, you can just start your day with a breakdown.
Yeah.
I know for work, we use the Asana app. We both use
Mm-hmm.
that, but I also have my personal calendar on the Asana app. I keep it separate from the work calendar, but it is on the same app. And one thing I love about Asana is when you cross something off your to-do list, it sends you like a flying unicorn that crosses the screen and glitter and like confetti. And it's like a little mini party every time you complete a
Whoever
task.
created it knew exactly what we were
What
going
we
for with
needed.
that.
Yeah. It
Yes.
speaks to my soul to see the little unicorn fly across the screen. I'm like, yes, thank you, unicorn.
Oh, man.
I feel the same.
If you just completed the task and nothing happened, no.
No,
They
no fun
need
in
to
that.
unicorn
No, I
glitter.
want confetti. I want a party. Yeah.
That's so fantastic. If that doesn't sell people after that, I mean, I'm in. That's
Yes.
totally. I love the also. I think there's something to. I could be wrong, but I think there's something to writing it out that it almost makes you remember it twice because you're writing it out.
Hmm.
Um, But you are right. There's a very fine line between it being helpful and it being almost like a trigger for anxiety and a trigger for overwhelm, which if you're one of those people, which man I am, it can be hard to continue that list after it gets to a certain point, because then you're like, this is impossible. Like,
yeah, and that's when I break my list into separate lists, or I keep it, I start a whole new one with the top 5 things I need to do. And then like a wish list. If I got those done, I would start here so that I don't have to see that crazy long, because I'll go crazy. I'll start adding things that I would love to do, like, clean out the storage closet. It's not priority today. This is not, something that needs to be done today, but I start thinking of all the things I know eventually need to be done, and I start writing them down. And that's when I get in this like shame spiral of I'm never, ever going to finish all of this.
Absolutely. But I mean, I feel like if I don't write certain things down, like drink water, or whatever the self-care is that I'm going to do for that day, whether it's workout or stretch or read, I have to literally read for 30 minutes, because if I don't, then I just won't do it. But if I write it as a part of my list, then it's almost like a priority thing, or a reminder, like a physical reminder of like, oh yeah, I haven't read today. Oh, it's 5 p.m. and I still haven't taken time to read today, which is supposed to be that self-care. So my list can be overwhelming. I don't know if I'd recommend it for everyone, but it works for me. But I do agree with you. When I do make the list, I start to get a little bit like of a heart palpitation. Like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Yeah. The next one, remain cautiously optimistic. That's always helpful. And
I think some people do this. I'm a naturally optimistic person, but I know not everybody is. My husband isn't. And sometimes I kind of have to hold his hand and walk him out of the negative zone, because when things start to go wrong, he just kind of assumes that everything is from that point on is going to go wrong. So I've learned what for him, the strategy that works for me to kind of talk him off the ledge with that mindset is to remind him of like things he's been through before and made it through and handled well. And look, you handled that, like you accomplished that. You can take this on. This is not a big deal. Or to have him in his mind, and he'll verbally do it with me, walk things out to the worst case scenario. So he'll say, well, I'm just worried that this isn't going to happen. And I'll say, okay, well, what if it doesn't? Then what? And we'll go all the way to the absolute end of the worst case scenario. And we kind of make our peace with that outcome, like absolute worst of the worst. And if we can handle that, then we can handle anything that falls short of that. So once he's kind of figured out, okay, if this absolute worst thing happens, this is what I'm going to do, and he has a strategy, then he feels like anything that happens that's that bad or less bad, he's got it. He can handle it. He has a plan. So that has helped him tremendously to kind of turn his thinking around.
That's a really, really cool outlook on it, because, I actually do the same thing too in my own head. I'm like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? And you go to the worst place, and then you realize that it's really not as bad as your brain is trying to get you to think it is.
Yeah.
And then it calms you down, which is like, people hear you go, well, if thinking about the worst thing would make it worse. No, it actually makes it better.
It does. It sounds like a very negative thought process, but it isn't. I mean, I get anxiety or stressed out when I'm running late for something, and it doesn't even need to be something important. It can be meeting a friend. It can be, the dentist. It can be something like kind of not a work deadline or something, but I'm running late and I start to stress out because I hate to be late. I think it's super disrespectful. I think, I don't want people to think that I believe my time is more valuable than their time. And my brain starts going down this whole thing. And so I ask myself, like, okay, you're late. So what will happen? Well, they might be offended, or they might think that you don't care, or they might, leave before you, and I will come up with okay, well, I'm going to apologize when I get there. I'm going to explain why I was late and tell them it's not a habit. And you can work it out in your head where you can talk yourself off this is the worst thing ever ledge.
Absolutely.
Because most things that we worry so much about don't even end up happening.
No.
And so we're doing all this worrying, and it's a lot of effort and for no reason.
Something about like worrying about it if it doesn't happen, then worrying about it did no good. And if it does happen, then you worried about it twice, you know?
Right.
So it's true. And I try and remind myself, which is so hard. It's so hard to, you have to, it's like a skill you have to practice. It's like a muscle you have to practice, because your natural instinct is going to, no matter who you are, is just going to want to take you down that path of like, horrible thoughts. And it's like, no, that doesn't actually happen. If you really sit back and think about it and calm down and like rationalize it and realize that worrying about it also does no good, which is easier said than done.
It really is.
You know,
it really is. But worrying about problems that you don't have yet, I mean, especially if nothing that you can do will affect the outcome. We just had a health scare in my family, and there was a lot of worry going around, and a lot of people like not panicking, but quite concerned. And I was asked by several people, like, how are you so calm? How are you not freaking out? And I was like, I'm not going to spend energy worrying about something that I don't even know if it's true yet. Like, let's just wait until we have an answer, and then we can worry.
It's very emotionally mature of you, by the way. It's hard to do because it's like this brain heart separation thing, you know? It's tough.
It is tough, but I knew in that situation, there's absolutely nothing I can do to affect the outcome.
Yeah,
you know?
No, absolutely not. It's true. And you just got to keep reminding yourself of that and reminding yourself of that. You know, I had the same situation this morning. I was per usual lately. I don't know why, but almost late to dropping off Emma to school. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, worst case scenario, what's going to happen? Okay, I have to park and I have to walk her up and I have to check her in versus her going to the gate, which she normally does, you know, but I'm thinking to myself like, oh, they're going to think I'm like the worst mom, or like that, like you were thinking like, oh, my time's more valuable than theirs, or, you know, I don't respect her time being at school, you know, it's all these different things go into my brain. But at the same time, it's like, it was fine. And
the truth of the matter is, most people aren't thinking about us.
No.
We always imagine everyone is so concerned with what we're doing. Nobody cares. They're all worried about their own stuff.
That's a whole nother podcast conversation about how we visualize the people thinking all these things about us that really no one's thinking at all.
Nobody's thinking about us. Yes. It's a very selfish mindset to think that everyone's so concerned with what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next one is do what gives you purpose, which I think ties into the self-care. At least for me, it does. Mm-hmm. I have certain things that I do that I say are just for me. And whether it's this, you know, my website, which is a huge creative outlet for me and a personal project of mine, if it's volunteer work that I do, anything that I do during the day that isn't necessarily for my kids or my husband or other family members, that's just really to feed my soul, that is kind of a do what gives you purpose thing. And I think when you're really in a bad place, I know for me, there have been a few times in my life when I was really in a bad situation. And one of the things that helped me the most was to do volunteer work. And it's like when you least feel capable of it, if you can go and do something for someone else, it doesn't have to be like a huge volunteer effort through some kind of organized but doing something for someone else that isn't an obligation, not a kid, not a parent, not a spouse, like not an obligation, something for the community, really helped me with my perspective on things and kind of to see my situation in a more rational light, because there are always people that are doing better than you and there are always people that are doing worse than you. And if you can contribute to your community and to people less fortunate than you, it really helps you not to make as big of a deal over your own problems and what's going on in your life, and keep that perspective.
Mm-hmm. No, that's absolutely. I feel like, especially during the pandemic, when we were all kind of put to ourselves to figure out who am I, what do I like, what do I enjoy. I mean, we all went through some really interesting.
I did a lot of puzzles.
Oh man, I mean,
so many puzzles.
I've crafted more in this year than I've ever crafted in my life. But you know what? For that time, that gave me purpose. Waking up and, you know, having people tell me that they were inspired to do something that they saw me do gave me purpose to do something more, because I felt like I was creating small joys in environments. I've never met these people, but they're literally telling me like my blog or my DIY, like really inspire them to do something. And then that kind of transitioned into me making a ton of things for my friends and like finding joy and like giving things to other people. And that was really great. But then I kind of realized that time, as much as it was that I enjoyed giving to other people, wasn't feeding my soul necessarily. So, now I do a lot of like working out, which feeds my soul in a whole new way. It doesn't serve any purpose to anyone else, but it makes me feel a whole lot better when I'm done working out or I'm done, doing so. It's a personal thing for me that I haven't ever done before, and that's what's feeding my soul right now, and giving me purpose.
And I think that do what gives you purpose is so personal. Like it can be something different for every single person.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and volunteer work is a great thing. A lot of people find joy in like, playing guitar at home, whatever it is. You got to find something that just like really is just outside of everything else, that just who gives you the person you are, who are you, like gives you something that just makes you feel great, whatever that is, and you have to dabble. Like I realize, like I am not a puzzle person. Puzzles are not my thing. I wish they were, but like I had to try out puzzles to realize that I am not a puzzle person.
You got to try a lot of things.
Yeah,
for sure.
And you have to keep trying to find your jam, and it may be your jam for like a little bit, and you may find something new. But always having that thing that feeds your soul and gives you purpose is so rewarding,
Yeah, and you don't have to be great at it. That's an important thing.
No.
A lot of people would love to try painting or sculpting or,
Baking,
making ceramic.
Cooking.
Yeah. And you can be terrible at it, and that's totally fine.
Absolutely. As long as it's giving you joy and it's not destroying anyone or harmful to anyone. Like rock on it. You don't have to be the next big super pop star violinist. You just need to want to know how to play violin. And when you play it, if it feeds your soul, then hey, you found it. That's all that you're looking for, is like that connection, So go to therapy.
Okay, well, that's a big one for Mental Health Awareness Month, right? Because I have yet to meet a single human, that's at least adult human, who could not benefit from therapy.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. Therapy looks all different is like in all different forms. It's not like. When I think therapy, I think person listening and somebody sitting on the couch or lying on the couch and telling their feelings and somebody writing down. Like now, because of the pandemic, there's so many forms of therapy.
Right. There's Talkspace, there's BetterHelp, where you can do it by text message. You can do it online. You can do Zoom with your therapist. Like there are so many options now. And I think especially for the younger generations, being able to text a therapist when they are having some kind of issue or crisis or just have a question is the way that they communicate. So that is such a huge benefit. They're not necessarily comfortable talking face to face with a relative stranger. So I think that's so great that they've come out with that. I wish that was available when I was a teenager. And I'm so, so thankful that the younger generations, I think starting with like our generation and younger, are so open to therapy and are so open-minded to mental health issues. Whereas, I mean, my parents' generation for sure weren't. I mean, if they had been, maybe we would need less therapy. I don't know.
Man, but I just feel like we all know someone who's just really gone through something or been through therapy and it's changed them. Like, I feel like we've normalized therapy and going to therapy and being open about your journey in therapy. We've normalized it where it was more taboo to admit that you were having some sort of mental struggle. Back then it was almost like it was like a weakness,
Yes,
I could
completely.
be wrong,
It was, people would go, oh, well, what's wrong with you? And nothing has to be wrong with you to want to go to therapy.
There's just like 4 different things that could be wrong with you. Right. Now there's just such a huge spectrum of what could be wrong, or not even wrong, but what could need a little bit more attention, Right.
And sometimes it's like finding better ways to communicate, whether you go to like a couples therapy or you go on your own and just kind of reframe some of the internal conversations that you have with yourself and just find ways to be kinder to yourself, or you find ways to communicate better with your children and your partner. And maybe you repeat habits that you had experienced growing up, and you don't want to do that. You want to break the chain of some
breaking
things.
the chain.
Yeah, that's so important. And a therapist can kind of help you see the reasons behind some of the behaviors in yourself that you're not happy with. And that is huge, because it does take kind of a neutral person. You don't want to hear that kind of, it's not criticism, but you don't want to hear that kind of feedback from a partner or from someone super close to you. You kind of need someone who's an expert to say, hey, I think the reason that you keep repeating this behavior is because this. Let's find better ways to handle that. And you're going to be open-minded to it, and you can actually kind of take that constructive criticism and learn better strategies for your life. Just it impacts every aspect of your life.
It does. Yeah, you definitely need that like non-biased third party to tell you sometimes that it's like, this is what's happening, or to bring something up that they've heard before about your childhood that could be connected to that. You know, there's and that could go from couples therapy to just going by yourself, like you said. Therapy also, you know, like I had a hard time finding, you know, when pandemic started to happen and I needed someone to talk to. This isn't something I would like highly recommend, but podcasts are really helpful, you know.
Yeah, they really are.
I know it's almost like coming from a biased perspective, because I do choose topics and people that I feel like might relate to more of like speak to me, when if I were to be with someone else and they were to hear me, they might have just like a completely non-biased perspective. Like I will choose topics and subjects and people that I feel like are more in tune with my level, but it really does help me hear things and see things, and it's free and it's on my phone and I can listen to it anytime. And it's almost like when I was having trouble in my relationships, I would look up, there's so many great relationship podcasts.
There really are.
Go through each subject, and you can find something that if you're just going through something in that moment and you may not have access to a therapist, you can still have helpful information by therapists that create podcasts that have information out there that can speak to you. YouTube is also a great feature that to use. You can type in anything and there will be licensed therapists on there that have created free, you know, helpful tools and videos that can help talk you through a hard situation that you may just need someone to talk to. Sometimes you might be going through something that you don't even want your best friend to have an awareness that you're going through, or your sister, because they worry, you know, like they tend to worry for you,
or that they're going to look at you differently, or that you're going to be a burden.
Have to fix it, you know. But you just you need someone to either further tell you that how you're feeling is valid, or to help you understand that maybe you're being irrational, whatever it is. But there are helpful free tools out there that are immediately available on your phone, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there used to be a huge push for self-help books. I know in like my child in the 80s and 90s, like self-help books were such a big deal. Yeah. And I think, you know, anytime you read a book like that, or you listen to a podcast that's kind of, based on whether it's psychology or therapy or any of, you know, motivational stuff, if you take away one thing that helps you in your life, like it was worth the time that you spent on it.
100%. Yeah.
And I think if you're listening and you're open-minded, you can almost always find at least one strategy that they're talking about that will help you.
Yeah, it's something to listen to. You don't have to actually say your side, but you can hear their advice and you can either apply it or don't apply it. But I always take away something, and it's almost like I take away something from the other person's perspective that I wouldn't have seen had I not listened to it. So I think that those are really helpful tools, that they aren't necessarily your standard therapist, but they are something that if you just need something in that moment that has to do with a certain subject, there are tools out there that can help you, that will give you guidance on how to handle it next, so that it doesn't snowball into like a bigger thing and a bigger thing and a bigger thing, you know, whatever that may be.
And I think too, there's a big benefit to some social media aspects of life now. Maybe not so much like Instagram or Facebook, but things like Twitter and TikTok, where it's strangers conversations that you're hearing bits and pieces of, because I feel like that a lot of people have found a community where they're like, oh my gosh, it isn't just me. I'm not alone in the way that I think. Like, I'm not the only person who's been through this. or who thinks like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps anytime you know that you're not, quote unquote strange, or like you're not isolated in your thinking, that there are a whole community of people who have the same issues that you do. It helps so much just to not feel alone. Even if it doesn't give you a solution, if you just know you're not the only one dealing with it, I mean, that's such a huge benefit.
It's
So
weird to
one
say.
positive thing.
I'm really excited that like mental health is talked about more and more and more, because it just makes me happy for the generation after and after and after, because then they don't have to feel so silent about what the things they're going through, because that's so destructive,
Right.
So the more open we are to people, it's okay not to be okay all the time, and to be able to talk about it and go to therapy and not be like, oh, that girl's, because I went to therapy when I was a kid. I've been in therapy since I was a kid, because my parents were going through their own issues and they thought that putting me in therapy would help, which it did. But it's something I've always been around, and it's something that I've always thought is very important,
But now in society now, it's so normalized, and
So
for our
normalized.
kids, it's going to be really just a part of their everyday life, like any other aspect of their health. They take multivitamin, they go exercise, they get enough sleep, and they do therapy. It's mental health is health. And so like I said, I've never met an adult who couldn't benefit from therapy, and I've never met an adult who doesn't have trauma, because we all do. Now, some are way worse than others, but it affects your response to all the other people in your life. And if you haven't explored that and you don't see it, having someone kind of walk you through that has that knowledge is so beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. The more aware you are of it, the more everything you don't have to fix it. It's just the being aware of the situation helps you feel less like there's something off, because you're always like, oh, well, what's wrong? Well, if you're more aware of it, then there's more ways to help that. And there's more
it's
ways
so much
for
easier
people to be there for you.
It's so much easier to break habits if you know where they came from.
Absolutely.
And if you know this, the psyche behind why you behave the way that you do. So I think this topic is a great segue into the imposter syndrome topic that we have coming out this week, because I think they both kind of fall under the category of Mental Health Awareness Month, but they also just are how we handle things, how we see ourselves, and how we see ourselves in relation to other people. I know for imposter syndrome it was briefly, thankfully, a huge issue for me. And I was able to overcome it, but only because of experience. And so I think I'm probably not alone in that. I think probably a lot of women, especially in the workplace, have this same issue, because women have been so marginalized in the workplace for so long, talked over, not promoted the same as men, not paid the same as men. So I think we have kind of this mental image of ourselves as women as being less than, or being less valuable, or what we have to say being, less valuable. And I think we're overcoming that. We really have come so far. It just in the last, very short last few years, I've seen such a huge difference in society and how they're talking about feminism, how they're talking about women in the workplace. But for me, with the imposter syndrome was, my life changed pretty quickly and pretty dramatically. I was very fine as a single mom, and doing fairly well in my career. But, then I met my husband, and he's extremely successful. So suddenly I was around all of these people who were highly, highly successful, high achiever people, graduated from the best universities, whatever you can imagine, times 1,000, right? And I didn't graduate college. I was a young mom. I was a single mom. I consider myself to be an intelligent person, but I got inside my own head a little bit in these social situations with people I had never been around before, and thinking, I can't add anything to this conversation. Nobody's going to want to hear what I have to say. I'm not at the same level. And so I wouldn't really speak as much when we were out socially. I wouldn't share my opinion freely, which isn't my personality at all. I very much share my opinion very freely. But I went through this period of time where I just felt like I was not comfortable, and I was not adding anything, that I had less value than the people I was around. And that really was not good for my mental health. And I think the way I worked my way through that was because I spent more and more time around these people. And I realized pretty quickly, like, they are just as messed up as me, maybe more. Like, I watched these highly intelligent, high achieving people from the top universities totally screw up on things and say stupid stuff and say stuff I knew was wrong, or, you know, have issues in their personal life that were the same that I had seen in my family. And that took time. That took time and experience for me to realize that people are all the same. And we may have opportunities that other people don't have. We may have privileges that other people don't have. And we need to be aware of those for sure. We need to be sensitive to that. But everybody's opinion is just as valid as anyone else's. And to eliminate yourself from the conversation just because you feel intimidated by the people around you, I really felt, I really went through something having that imposter syndrome, because I am usually so outspoken, and I usually consider myself to be able to add to the conversation. For me to kind of dull my sparkle and silence myself was really damaging for me. I really needed to explore where that came from. And a lot of it came from my own insecurities. I did have kind of not a chip on my shoulder, but I did have regret that I hadn't gone to college, that I had kids young. And so I needed to kind of reframe that as something positive. Like that took a lot of effort from me to figure out everything that has to do with having kids as young as I had them, and with no, role model. I just kind of had to figure out life, and that's kind of school of hard knocks. No, I didn't go to Harvard, but I definitely went to the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
And I came out of it, with, I think, really great kids and a lot of work experience. I've always worked, and I've always worked really hard. So I just kind of had to talk myself through that. It was a big issue for me. So to see, the article that we're talking about, one of the examples that we use is that even Michelle Obama has come forward to say that she really felt like a fake for a long time, and that she was going to be caught out as an imposter. And that's insane. She's so accomplished. She's so educated, like well-spoken. I can't imagine where that would come from, but it doesn't have to come from anywhere. It's just something within yourself that you need to work through. For me, yeah, it took being around people who I considered to be way above my station, quote unquote, and seeing them be just as human as me, to realize that everybody has the same mess. Everybody has the same mess. We just have different privileges and different opportunities. So that imposter syndrome was a really big deal for me. And I think I'm probably not alone in that. I think a lot of women probably feel that way, especially, we do take time off from our careers to have kids. We wouldn't have the same opportunities as for education if we had our kids young, or we go back to school late in life and finish our degrees, whatever it is that makes you feel like you're not able to add to the conversation in the workplace, or the conversation with people who weren't on the same trajectory as you. You really just need to examine where that's coming from and give yourself credit for all the things that you have achieved. As moms, we juggle more than most men. We take on most of the childcare responsibilities. We take on a lot of the household finance responsibilities while we juggle work, while we do a million other things. A lot of times we're caring for elderly relatives as well. They call us the sandwich generation for a reason, right? We take care of our kids, and we take care of our elderly parents and grandparents. We have a lot on our plate. So we deserve respect for that. And we self-respect for that, to give ourselves the credit of, while we may not have achieved the same things in our career that other people had who don't have the same challenges we have, we've done so much, and we have been capable of doing so much at the same time. We have to give ourselves credit for what we have achieved and not downplay it. A lot of women do that. They say, oh, I'm just a homemaker, or I only work part-time, or don't do that. Don't downplay your accomplishments, because all of us work incredibly hard doing all of the things that we do, and it's all honorable, and it's all valuable, and it all adds to the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I personally can relate to that's a great story. I can totally understand that. I come from a space where I'm like an influencer, like a content creator influencer, and I do it in a space, in a Disney space mainly. And that space is super saturated. And the women that I consider my friends are wonderful people. They're all great. They all do similar things. We all have different types of account engagement reaches and follower accounts. And that's a big factor when you're getting certain deals and stuff like that. So there's this whole imposter syndrome going on, where if someone gets a brand deal and you don't, that means you're not as valuable, or there's this constant comparison game going on that, man, I mean, I've been doing this for years now. I've been doing this for 2-3 years, and during the pandemic was especially hard when we didn't have things like the theme park to access to create content and showcase our value with. And it was supposed to be a creative space, and then it became a competitive space for me, which I'm still all about. I'm really competitive. But then it just became a space where I never felt like any of my achievements were good enough because I wasn't getting certain deals that other people were. My best friend also does the things that I do, but her follower account is much higher, so her opportunities are much bigger. But I also know, because we're best friends, that her life is as equally crazy and impossible as mine, and we all go through the same things, and it's like we're laughing because it's like no one's life is perfect, and I'm so happy for her, but at the same time I also know that if she's going through that with that type of following, then everyone's going through it. You know what I mean? We're all just trying to juggle and look like we can do it perfectly. And that just kind of dwindled the fun for me for a little bit. I had to tell myself, I had to remove the toxicity from it. I had to tell myself that I was going to cheerleader the what out of every single thing that I had coming my way. And even though it might not be what A, B, C, and D got, it was still an opportunity that I got, and I should be proud of every opportunity that I have. Because if I was constantly comparing myself to others and showing what I wasn't getting opportunities for, then I was dulling my own sparkle in my own head, and I wasn't really, then who was I doing it for, So I decided that if I was going to continue to do this, that I was going to do it with the idea that I was going to be proud of everything that I did. Because if I did it from a place of comparing myself, or, not feeling like it was ever enough, then there would be no point to any of it,
Yeah.
It's a toxic place, that influencer world. It can be any type of influencer, but you're always competing with the next person next to you, who, by the way, is losing their mind too. So don't think that they have it all together. They don't, and you can find that it might just not. You have to, whatever that is, you have to make sure that it's healthy. Because if it's not serving you from a good place mentally, then maybe removing it or toning it down, or, being more selective on the things that you put inside your life to value your mental health above all else. You have to take care of yourself, because if you're doing your own sparkle for who cares, whoever it is, whether it's the people that you were speaking of being around or the people online, that's not what we're supposed to be doing as human beings. And it can really affect a lot of areas of your mental health that you're not aware of. It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah. And I think that kind of comparison can happen in any space, even if you're not an influencer. It's really, really common to do the comparison thing with other moms if you have kids the same age, especially when they're small, if they're meeting milestones. And then when they get older, my kid got into this college and this kid got into that college, and they got this scholarship, or they're in sports varsity, and my kid only made JV. It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. And we need to let that go, because it's horrible for us. It's horrible for our kids. And I think that happens in workplace as well, in an office environment, that who's getting promotions, who's not, whose salary is what. I mean, we have to let it all go. And
it's a tough thing, because it sometimes can be driven by people way higher than you, but at the same time it affects your mental health.
Yeah.
It
And
really
if
does.
you know that you're doing the best to your ability, and you're happy with whatever you're producing, whether it's in motherhood, in career, in the online space, whatever that is, You just have to be happy with what you're doing and compare yourself only to yourself. It's a lot harder said than done. I know that.
Oh, yes.
And I know for me, like I will get brand deals. I will get, collabs, jobs that people give me. And I think, oh my gosh, they're going to figure out that I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Right.
But nobody knows what the heck they're doing. I mean,
Nobody does.
it's
Nobody
true.
does.
Nobody does. We are
It's
all
okay.
completely clueless. And we are, at least the first time people do things, they have no idea what they're doing. That's universal for everyone.
Yeah, don't worry about being perfect. It's okay. The only way to figure it out is to practice and go through the rough patches, because
and
no
to
one
not,
has
I
it
mean,
figured out.
there's a whole like fake it till you make it thing, which I completely, I wing it all the time. That's how I live my life. But
We all
also
do.
it's okay to admit that you don't know what you're doing and ask for help, because sometimes we're in over our heads and that's what's required. And it's hard to do that. It's hard to say.
It's hard for people to admit too that they don't have it all together. There's almost like with this like imposter syndrome of like not being enough. You also, when you have it, you also like don't really know how to be vulnerable about it at the same time.
Yeah,
Sometimes
your defenses go up.
when I have a bad day and I'm open about it online, people are like, thank you for being open about your bad day. I'm like, that just reminds me, too many people think everyone has a perfect day all the time,
Yeah.
And it's just, you don't have to be completely open and vulnerable, but you do have to be a little bit open and vulnerable. The
Yeah.
vulnerable factor is big to it.
You'd be surprised how many people, if you are vulnerable, will come out and say, thank you so much, because I thought I was the only one, or we'll let you know privately, I went through that too. And I wasn't comfortable talking about it, but
and it helps you almost like release the pressure from yourself to be perfect all the time. When people thank you for being more human, you allow yourself to be more human,
right.
to
and
everyone in your life.
I just wrote an article on Mental Health Awareness Month that touched on that, because I had said in the article, I have a child with mental health issues. And when that started to come about in his preteen years, that was very hard for me, because for one, you feel like a terrible parent. You feel like you did it. You caused something to go wrong. Like, that's normal. I think anytime our kids do something outside of our expectations of them, we assume something we did made that happen. That's a normal mom thing. But also I realized, first of all, I had no idea what to do. I had no idea who to reach out to, how to handle it. I've never been through anything like that in my life. And it was very difficult, because like when my kids needed braces or when my daughter needed glasses, I had no problem calling all my mom friends and saying, hey, what orthodontist do you use? What obstetrician what optometrist do you use? Because I need one. But when it was a mental health issue, I did not feel that I could do that. Because first of all, none of my friends had even mentioned that they were dealing with anything like this. And I was embarrassed, and I really had to sit with that and I examined where that was coming from, because it wasn't healthy for me. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't what was best for my child. I needed to advocate for my child, and that required me being vocal. And it doesn't require me telling, my child's story to the world, because it's not my story to tell, but it did require me being able to ask for resources. Whether that was from their school, whether that was from their doctors, from treatment centers, whatever that my child needed, I needed to be able to A, admit that they needed that, and B, ask where to get it. And if I had had friends who had been more open about things they were going through, I would have had a support system, and I didn't. But when I was open about it, which I have been from the beginning, so many people came to me later and said, I was going through the same thing with my husband, with my best friend, with my mom, with my child, and I was too afraid to talk about it. So thank you, for giving me even one person I can talk to about it, who I know has been through this. So it's so important. It's like incredibly important that we are open with all aspects of mental health. Mental health is health, and that we are able to support each other without judgment, because how else do you get through something, whether it's someone in your family with mental health issues, or imposter syndrome, or anxiety, depression, like anything that we can be dealing with as women, as mothers, as spouses, just in general. We have to be able to ask for help.
I agree. I think just being open about it and just admitting that it's okay to talk about and normalizing it, it helps. we're all naturally prideful people. So
Of course.
if we get permission to be who we really are by somebody, then that's sometimes all that we need to get the process going. Because if you feel weird or feel unaccepted or feel judged or feel like it's going to upset someone because you don't want to pour your issues on someone else, whatever it may be, if you never open the door, then nothing will ever happen. But the minute that somebody is like, I know exactly what you're going through. Like, I'm a big fan of Demi Lovato. She is someone
she's been so open.
No matter what she's going through in life. And of course, she probably hasn't said every single tiny little detail, but man, I watched her documentary. I've been a fan of her since she was on the Disney Channel. I've followed her, but she is someone that has been so open about being a human, about making mistakes, about relapsing and coming through and being so grateful to be alive and she literally wrote a song called It's Okay Not to Be Okay. And I think that you have someone like, I have a child with mental health issues as well. And if they have someone out there who is in such a public eye that is just so okay with being themselves, they have an advocate, that they can relate to and talk to. It's just, you just need to open that door, because the minute we feel judged is the minute we go silent. And the minute you go silent is the problem.
But the moment that someone says, I see you exactly where you are, and I accept you exactly as you are, that is so freeing. And that is all we need to hear. And that can be a therapist, that can be a loved one, that can be a friend, that can be a celebrity who says, that they are in the same boat and we feel accepted.
Exactly.
Because we see how society reacts to them with such love and acceptance, usually, hopefully. And that tells us that we can be more open about it. So I am so thankful that we had this conversation today about mental health awareness month.
It's such a perfect time. And you were right. They coincide with each other so well, the two topics. And
hopefully someday we won't need to have a mental health awareness month. It can just be a normal part of our health. But at least we're talking about it.
It's a good start,
Yes, it is a good start. There's like murder going on in the background.
I'm so sorry. I'm like trying to play it cool,
it's
but
hilarious.
I love what's happening. To be fair, they did a really good job for 40 plus minutes, but after
agree.
That, they're like
that was the tail end. I love it
this time. And like I said last week, this isn't supposed to happen right now. We're supposed to be doing this in the morning, but I had to help with the pig. So here we are.
You know what? We're real people and we're juggling our real lives and commitments. And I think that makes it even more listenable.
You're a mom of 4 kids. Sometimes hearing noise means something okay, because at least like they're
the
alive.
silence is the scariest thing of all. Absolutely.
Silence is the worst. You're like, they've been too good for too long. This can't be good. Oh, well, thank you for being patient with that. And
of course,
we'll have that next week.
Well, I loved our topics today, and I can't wait for next week. We have more to talk about. And thank you guys for joining us again.
Yes,
if you have articles that you've read on our site that you would love to have us cover on the podcast, please feel free to email us at she'safullonmonet@gmail.com, and we will try to cover your suggested topics.
Wonderful.
All right. Talk to you soon, Megan. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to bookmark our site, she'safullonmonet.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you're enjoying this podcast, it helps us a lot if you can follow, rate, and review. See y'all next week.